Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. I see we got one more person trying to sign in, so we'll give them a moment, and then we'll begin here very shortly. All right, well, we have a lot of material to cover in the hour, so I'd like to begin. This is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar, and today is Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. My name is Eric Johnson, and I will be your Windward training facilitator today. I'm a technical support engineer here at Windward Studios. I've been here for a little over a year now. Well, welcome everyone. You may have noticed that when you logged into the GoToMeeting webinar, you have a toolbar. The arrow that you see on the screen is pointing to the raise your hand icon. If any time during the webinar you have a question or are experiencing technical difficulties, please feel free to click that button to ask your question or notify me of anything that's wrong. The prompts I have for questions and chat are on my other screen, so I may not see your question immediately. Usually I wait until the Q&A session at the end to answer questions, but I'll look now and again to see if anything has been raised. Again, this is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar. So we're assuming that you've built some templates. They could have been very simple templates, that you've installed Report Designer, that you know how to use tags, that you know how to connect to your data sources. You know enough about Report Designer to get you started. And you may have joined us last week for the basic Report Designer training. Now, to give you an idea of the kind of machine I'm working on today, I'm using Windows 10 operating system, which is 64-bit. I'm using Office 2016, also 64-bit. And the version of Report Designer that I'm using is 16.2.0.188. And you can always download the latest version of Report Designer from our downloads webpage off of our website. Okay, I want to give you a high-level overview of what we'll be discussing today. I'll go over some advanced for each features, showing you how to group with for each tags. We'll discuss conditional formatting, in which we'll cover two types of conditional formatting. One where I'm showing and hiding content using Report Designer tags, and a second type of conditional formatting that formats output based on conditions. We'll also go over the equation editor, where I'll show you how to add a function to a template. We'll discuss the if and switch tags and what the differences are. I'll show you examples of the import tag, and of course the Q&A session is at the very end. So the for each tag, let's review what it actually does. It does three things. First, it grabs a set of data, any set of data that you want to pull from your data source. Second, it loops through that set of data that you selected to work with. And third, it repeats all the elements between the tags, the beginning and ending for each tag. I'll show you the importance of where to place these beginning and ending for each tags and show you the results of placing these tags in different ways. We'll also get into grouping data or nesting for each tags, where I'll show you how to group your data with nested for each tags. Let's hold off on that for just a moment. Okay, we're now going to move away from this PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to open up a blank Word document. All right. Now that I have a blank Word document open, I'm going to open up the Windward Tools tab, and I'm going to click on the Samples button. And this opens up our Getting Started guide. And then in this Samples template section right here, there's this additional section. And within this section, you'll find tag tutorials for SQL, XML, and JSON. For today, we're going to focus on XML. So I'm going to select that, tag tutorials SQL. And the first example that we're going to look at is the for each sample template. So I'm going to go ahead and select that for each tag sample. And that's the this one right here. All right, now to begin with, we're going to focus on the first sample right here, the for each tag without a table. It is possible to use the for each tag without a table. Yes, it is, as you can see from this sample here. And below this is a for each tag in a table, what we saw a lot on the last basic webinar. All right, so I'd like to point out a couple of things here with this example, this for each tag without a table. The first thing is where you place the beginning and ending for each tags. And the second thing I'm going to point out is why the placement is important when you loop through your data. Before we do anything else, let's go ahead and select the for each tag. And I'm going to come up to go to the Windwards tab, and I'll click on the preview button. This lets me see the data that we're working with. All right, so here we're returning everything from the category tables. We saw this last week. It's category ID, category name, description, and picture. Okay, and now what is the alt tag that's next to this for each tag going to return? So let's go ahead and select this alt tag, come up here and click preview. Okay, here we're pulling the category IDs from the category tables. Just a bunch of numbers. Okay, now what's this second alt tag doing? I'm going to go ahead and select it. Come up here again and click preview. Okay, the second alt tag is pulling the category name from the categories table, beverages, condiments, confections, and so on. Okay, and then we have our end for each tag right below, right here on the next slide. So let's go ahead and show you what the output's going to look like. I'll come up here and click output. All right, let me split the screen. All right, in the output, you'll notice that we're just showing a category ID, this number one, a dash, and then the category name. And each one of these categories, beverages, condiments, confections, are ending up on a different line, as you see here. Well, how is this actually happening? Why is it inserting the next record on a separate line? We'll close the output and go back to the template for a moment. Well, the reason that it's displaying the record on the next line is that we added the end for each tag on the very next line. So there's nothing after this second alt tag, just all this white space right here. Then the ending for each tag is on the next line. So you can see more closely what's happening. I'm going to go up here to the Home tab, and I'm going to turn on Show Hide Formatting. Now you can see that right after the last alt tag is this paragraph marker right here. So what's happening is that we're actually providing a carriage return after the last alt tag, so we can add the end for each just below it. What if we took away this carriage return? Let's delete it so that we can place the end for each tag right after this final alt tag right here. Well, what will our output look like now? Let's go ahead and click Output to see. We'll come up here to Windward tab and click Output. Yes to save. Let's split the screen again. All right, now our output looks very different. You still see the number 1, the dash, and then the category name, in this case, beverages. And then immediately after this first record, the second record starts, and there isn't even a space between the records. You can see this in the template over here. There's an alt tag, a dash, a second alt tag, and after the alt tag is this end for each tag without a space between the out and the end for each tag. This is why it's lining up on the same line for each record in the output. It's telling Report Designer to go back and display the next category ID, dash, and category name right next to each other. And then when the output gets to the right margin, it simply just carries on and goes to the next line. And it does this across the page as well as down the page. So this is why the output is lining up on the exact same line for each one of these categories. It's because of the placement of your for each tag. Let's go ahead and change this back. I'm going to do a Control Z. Let's go ahead and click on this. Control Z. As you just seen, it's important where you place the end for each tag. Everything between the for each and ending for each tags, including this carriage return, are repeated each time it iterates through the for each loop. Close the output. Make that bigger again. All right, before we move on, I'd like to point out the tag tree button. And that's located in this Windward tab over here. I'm going to go ahead and click it. And when I do, over here on the right side, tag tree column appears. And this tag tree is very helpful, especially when reviewing templates that you haven't seen before, as it lets me know of all the tags that are in the template. So let me expand this main story. And our main story is for the main document. If I had tags in the headers or the footers, those would display differently. So we would have main story, header, footer. But since I only have tags in the main body, we only see in the main story. So as you can see from this tag tree, you can see that we only have tags set up. But let's go ahead in the main story. So let's go ahead and focus on this last for each, the customer for each tag. So to help you out when you're trying to locate a specific tag, you can double click any tag in the tag tree to go directly to where that tag is in the template. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this last for each tag, the customer loop. And when I did that, you see it has now brought me down to the bottom of the document right here, and it's highlighted. So again, this helps whenever you've never seen a tag before and you're trying to locate it. Now I'm going to expand this customers loop fully and discuss its makeup a little bit. So here we have our outer for each loop, which is this customer loop. And then there's an inner for each loop, which is right here. And this is connected to our customer outer loop. You can see that line right there. And this is where we'll be talking about grouping. And there's also, within this, we have a company name alt tag within the outer loop. And then in the inner loop, we have another alt tag. We have this N for each tag, which relates to this inner for each loop. And then we have another N for each tag, which relates to this customer loop. And when you select a tag through the tag tree, you get below the tag tree this properties window. In this window, you can change any of the tag's properties, any of them right here, or you can even view the query that's related to this tag. For some reason that's not showing up. But you can usually see the query that's related to that tag. So this just gives you a quick snapshot of what's happening with the tag. This is the same thing as opening up the more advanced tag editor, which we'll see in a little bit. And I think sometimes I've had problems with the webinar, the GoToMeeting webinar, not displaying some of this information. But when I reviewed the material earlier, the query was listed in here. Okay, so let's get back to the sample. So what's going on here in the sample? Well, we have this outer for each tag, this customers loop, and we want to group some data based on the company name. So let's go ahead and preview the customers loop to see the data that we're working with. So I'm going to go ahead and select it, come up here and click preview. And here it's just returning, looks like 4 records, which contain the customer ID and the company name, all companies that begin with the letter A. Next thing, between this beginning and ending for each loop, for each tag, is the company name alt tag. Let's go ahead and preview it to see what it's going to return. So it's just returning the company name right here. All right, perfect. Just what we were thinking it was going to return. Next thing in this sample is another for each tag right here. And this is our inner for each tag. So let's preview this inner for each tag to see what it's returning. And as you can see, it's returning all of the orders, all these order IDs that pertain to a specific customer ID. So let's say you have a list of company names and you want to see all of the orders for each company name as it goes through the list. Well, this is exactly what we're going to be doing here in this sample. All right. Now let's take a look and preview this alt tag. I'm going to go ahead and select it, click preview. And here we're simply returning the order ID and nothing else. Even though we were bringing back all sorts of information from this inner for each tag, we're only going to be displaying the order ID. All right, before we move any further, let's take a look at how this will look in the output. I'm going to go ahead and click output, say yes to save. I'm going to split the screen again. I'm going to close the tag tree. It's not needed right now. And I'm going to scroll all the way down to the grouping for each tag example that we've been talking about. A little further. Here we go. So we have our loops here in the template, and over here in the output on the right over here, you can see the results of that loop. We have the number 1, the company name, and all of the order IDs that's associated with this company name right here. So all these order IDs. Then the for each loop iterates to the next company, the next record, and it displays that company name and all its orders. And we do that until we run out of companies to display. So now let's take a closer look at this number 1 right here in the list. See how it's repeating the number 1 for each one of these companies? Here's the 1 again, another company name. Here's the 1 again, and another company name. And this is where we're grouping our orders using specific company names. So let's take a look at this, at how this is set up. I'll close the output and expand this. So how do we tie this inner for each loop to this outer customer for each loop? Well, before we do anything else, let's look at the outer for each loop. So with it selected, I want to come up here and point out that this customer loop variable name is var name 10. And this variable is what Report Designer uses to identify this for each loop. So let's go ahead and remember this var name 10 variable name for the customer loop. Okay, now let's select this inner for each tag. And this time, I'm actually going to click on our wizard button. And this opens up a SQL select wizard. And then here in the center, you can see this is the data that we're bringing back in from that inner for each loop. I can minimize that right now. All right, so how do we tie this inner for each tag with this outer for each tag? Well, we do that through the filter section right here. And as you can see, it's already set up for us. I'm going to expand this just a little so we can get the full length of it. All right. So what we're doing is we're collecting the customer ID from the orders table, and we're checking if it's equal to the value of the var name 10 customer ID. Now remember, var name 10 is the variable name for our customer outer loop. So having the customer ID from the orders table equal to the customer ID of the var name 10, we can utilize these similar customer ID keys and connect the inner loop to the outer loop. Now, if I click on the drop down, now if I click on this var name 10 and expand the drop down, here we can see our var name 10 for each loop. And this is all the things that I can connect to within this inner for each loop. And of course, we're using the customer ID. You'll notice over here and on the right in our data preview pane, there is that first customer ID right here and all of the orders that pertain to that customer ID. So this is how you connect your inner for each loop, this orders.customer ID, to your outer for each loop, this var name 10 customer ID. Okay. Cancel out of the SQL wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and generate the output again. Split the screen. I'm going to scroll all the way down to this example. All right. Now I want to explain what is actually happening when we generate the output with the engine. And each report designer has a small .NET engine built into it. So what's happening is that our engine is completely stripping out the data from your template, collecting that data, and then rebuilding from scratch, from top down, everything that's in your template. So the output shows the data that you wanted and displays it how you formatted it within your template. Okay, so what's happening here in our example, Report Designer collects all the data from the customer loop and all the data within the inner for each loop, ties it together, and when it produces the output, it says, okay, what's after the customer loop? And the first thing that it comes across is this numbered list and company name right here. Then what does it do? It sees the inner for each loop, so it grabs that data and displays the out tag for this inner loop right here. And it will do this for all the order IDs that are associated with this company name. It'll loop through everything, displaying everything between this beginning and ending for each tag, displaying the order IDs, and then when it gets to the next line, it encounters another ending for each tag. And this just tells the engine to go back to the beginning of our outer loop and collect the next record and repeat the process, iterating through the loop and displaying the company name and all of its order IDs that are associated with it. So this just gives you an idea of how our engine is tearing down your template and rebuilding it from scratch after pulling all your data from your data source. So this is how you group your data using nested for each loops. Okay, I want to close this output. Okay, next thing I like to go over before leaving this for each tag sample is on the page above, and it's this nested for each loop sample right here. This one right here. So we've been creating for each tags using row-based formatting. We're now going to discuss how to use for each tags for column-based expansion. So there are three things that are different when you want to create columns instead of rows. This example above, right up here, is typical when creating row-based for each tag loops. So that we have our for each tag within our table. It's going to loop through this for each tag, displaying all the data from all these different alt tags, and also displaying the cells formatting if anything has been set up. And then the end for each tag is outside of the table. And this is what you typically want to do. But in this next example, the column-based example, the end for each tag is inside the table. Before we go any further, let's preview the for each tag to see the data that it's returning. I'm going to go select it and click preview. All right, so it's returning a list of categories, everything from our categories table: category ID, category name, description, and picture. Okay. Okay, and now what is the alt tag displaying? So I'm going to select that, click preview, and this is just returning the category names: beverages, condiments, and so forth. So instead of creating a list top down of category names, we're going to create columns left to right across the page. So let's go ahead and take a look to see how this output looks. Click output. And split the screen. I'm going to scroll all the way down to our column-based expansion example. And here it is right here. So instead of going, excuse me, one moment, please. Sorry about that. So instead of going top down, as you see here in this table right here when we're creating rows, we're going left to right, expanding the table, creating new columns as we process the records in the for each tab. All right, well, typically, when you place an end for each tag within a table, it should create a blank row. Oh, it actually does. Oh, sorry. Looks like I must have been on this earlier and saved something. Well, let's see. Let me start this little part differently. Skip ahead a little bit. All right, now let's go ahead and create the output. I must have been working on the sample template earlier and saved it somewhere halfway through my building of the template. Oh, let's split the screen. All right, as I was saying, typically when you place an end for each tag within a table, it should create a blank row at the very end of the list. But we're not seeing that right here. There's no blank row in our output. Well, again, let me show you why that is. So there's a couple of ways to edit a tag. You can either double click on a tag, or you can select the tag and come up here within the Windward tab and click the Edit Tag button. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. When I click the Edit Tag, it opens up our tag editor. And in the tag editor, there's two tabs. There's this Query tab, and then there's the Properties tab. And now the end for each tag isn't used to query anything. That's why you see this Query tab is blank. It's just used to tell Report Designer when to stop looping through the data and repeating the elements. Now, within the Properties tab, there's this delete row attribute. When I select it, you can see a short description, suppress the row and output. And this right now is equal to true. And this is why we're not showing that last blank row, because we have delete row equal to true. Now, if I was to turn this off, like it was when we started, save the tag, and generate output, what is the output going to look like now? Yes to save. Let me split the screen. Scroll down. All right. And so as you can see now, setting that delete row to false, we now have a blank row here where the end for each tag was located. Before we didn't have this blank row, but we do now because we turned that property delete row for our end for each to false. And now the last thing that you need to do for column-based expansion is to change the property value for the for each tag to create columns instead of rows. So I'm going to go ahead and double click for each tag over here to open up our tag editor. And now this tag editor is a little more robust than the quick snapshot we saw earlier in the tag tree. Here we have our preview button, and when I click on that, you can see the results right here: category ID, name, description, and picture, all the columns from the category table. And then there's a wizard button, just like the button that we saw on our Windward tab, and this allows you to see your SQL wizard. There's an equation button, which I'll show you a little later, that can be used to add an equation to a tag. Then there's the next and previous buttons, which takes you to the respective tags without even leaving the tag editor. And on the left, just like our data bin, there's our tables and views that we have access to see. And on the right is our query window. And your query window is probably white. If I right click within the window, there's this color scheme option. And for me right now, I'm using base 16 ocean dark. What is normal is that plain option down here. Okay, now if I click on the properties tab, this is where we set our column-based expansion for the for each tag. Now, there's some advanced properties that you can set. There's some standard properties, but we're going to set the column-based expansion down here in the tag properties. And within this, you'll notice the order attribute, how to expand the for each. And it is presently set to column. And this is why we're getting the column-based expansion. Now, if I were to click the drop-down list right here, this gives you a list of options I can choose from. So there's legacy, and legacy is what is used by default. Legacy isn't much different from row. It's the original way we built the tag. There's the row attribute, and this does a little more than legacy. If you want to delete a row with the end for each, you'll have to use this option. And in our Ohana knowledge base, there is some more information on how legacy is different from row. But since we're expanding not by rows, but by columns, we'll want columns set for order. And with column selected, I'll go ahead and click Save. And you can see the results right here of having this for each tag as a column. Here we create columns across the page as opposed to rows down the page. Okay, I'll close that. So let's go ahead and change this back to how it was initially. I'm going to double click on this and for each tag, open the tag editor, go to the properties tag, and change delete row back to true. Save the tag, generate output, say yes. And now we should not see that extra blank row in our columns expansion. And then I scroll down here. We set the end for each to delete row, and now we no longer see that blank row. So 3 things for column-based expansion. First, you need to make sure your for each tag is set to column. Second, your end for each tag is within the table. And third, the delete row attribute for the end for each tag is set to true. All right, I'm going to close this output. Let's go back to our slides for a moment. Okay, we've seen that one. All right, we talked about legacy row, column for each type. We talked about the delete row attribute, which deletes the row where the end for each tag is placed. Okay, well, we have over 50 equations of functions available for you to use when you're using Report Designer. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. I have a sample already started. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And here it is. All right. So this is our equation editor sample. And here we're going, within this sample, we're going to add a sum function to create a total of the sales amounts for all of our salespeople. And you can see we already have a sales table set up. And we have, within this table, we have our sales loop for each tag. We have a bunch of alt tags, salesperson, calls num, leads generated, and sales amount. And then we have our end for each tag outside of the table. Now, before we do anything else, let's take a look at our sales loop. So I'm going to select it, go to the Windward tab, and click Preview. And here it looks like it's just returning the same things that we're showing in our alt tag, the salesperson, the call numbers, the leads generated, and the sales amount. All right, before we actually add that sum function to this template, I want to show you how to conditionally format text by displaying red text for those salespeople who are not meeting their quota. A real life example. All right, to do this, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the sales amount alt tag. And once the tag editor opens, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to expand this for each in this var1 in our data tree pane. And the var1 variable is just related to our sales loop. And it's returning the data from the salesperson's call number, lead generated, sales amount, and ID. All right, let's now open our properties table. And over here in our tag section, there's this condition field. I'm going to expand this so we can see the full length of what's already set up. And here you can see an equation already listed. And when I select in this field, you'll notice that ellipsis here appears at the end of the line. I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and this opens up our Conditional Formatting Rule Manager. So whenever you add an equation or whenever you want to evaluate data, you want to begin that query with an equal sign, as you see right here. So here we have our equal sign, our dollar sign, our bracket, our var name 1, and our var name 1 just refers to our sales loop. And we're looking within that sales loop at the sales amount. And we're checking, is the sales amount less than 8,000? Okay. Now that you see that we have an equation built, what happens if we want to format it a certain way? Well, if I know the formatting code, like something that's already set up here, I can just add that syntax directly into this field. Or if I'm unaware of what the syntax should be, I can click on this wizard button, and this opens up the format options window. And here we can format the text to be italics, bold, underline. We can strike through it, change the text color, change the text color of the background. And since we're working with tables, you'll see this cell tab right here. And this allows us to change the border line style, the border line color. I can give it a cell color, or even alignment within the cell. Let's go back to the text tab. And for this example, we're just going to change the color of the text to red for sales amounts less than 8,000. And so we've done that right here in the text color. We've entered in the hex code in this field for the color red. Unfortunately, we don't have a color palette at this point. That's something we want to add as an option. For now, you'll have to enter in the hex code, and FF000 is the hex code for red. So this is exactly what we want to see, the formatting we want to apply. So with that set, I'm going to click OK, and here you would see our formatting syntax. So if I wanted to add another rule, I could do that by clicking this Add Rule button. If I set up a rule I no longer want, we can go ahead and delete it. But since this is all I want to do, show text in red for those sales amount less than $8,000, I'm going to click OK. We can save the tag. And I'm going to go ahead and click Output so you can see what this conditional formatting looks like. Split the screen. Okay. We don't need this show hide property, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. There we go. So you can see any sales amount that is less than $8,000 is displayed in red. Any over 8,000 is displayed in its default color. So this is one way to conditionally format an alt tag for output. All right. Now let's get back to the template and add a sum function. So again, what happens if we needed to total all the sales amount within this table? We can do this by adding a new row in our table underneath this first row. So I'm going to go ahead and select this N for each tag and delete it. Did that by using that delete button right there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new row by clicking on this plus sign right here. And here's our new row added. So we're now going to do what I told you not to do earlier when it comes to row-based templates. And this is a row-based template as we're going to be moving top down. And that's to add the N for each tag inside the table. So if my cursor placed within inside the table, the leftmost column, I'm going to go up to the tags, and I'm going to add an N for each tag. All right, now let's go and add some text to label what we wanted to display. And so here, let's go ahead and put in the word total. since we're going to be showing the total of the sales amount. And let's go ahead and format this total word. Let's go over here to the Home tab. Let's make it bold. And then let's also right align it. All right. Now we need to add an alt tag right next to this total underneath the sales amount column to display the total. So I'm going to, with my cursor here in the sales amount column, I'm going to go to Windward tab, click on the tags button, and choose alt. Okay, now that it's here on the table, I'm going to go ahead and double click it to open our tag editor. And now this time in our tag editor, I'm going to go ahead and click on the equation button. And this opens up our insert function wizard. Here we have some different categories that you can choose from: date and time, math and trig, statistical, database, text, logical, custom. Since I know I'm looking for the sum, I'm going to go ahead and select math and trig. And I'm going to scroll through the functions in alphabetical order and select sum. Now, when I select the function I want to use, underneath it is a description of that function. The sum function adds all numbers in a range of values. Okay, since this is the function I want to use, I'm going to click OK. And here we have our equation. We got our equal sign and the word sum and empty brackets. And again, you always want to start with the equal sign when you evaluate, which it was done for us. So let's go ahead and add to this equation. What are we going to sum up? Well, we can enter what we want to sum up in this number 1 field, or we can go ahead and click on this wizard button, which I'll do right now. And this opens up our SQL select wizard. Here, I'm going to expand our tables. And I'm going to expand sales, since that's the table we're working with. That's where we're collecting our data from. So we want to take the sales amount and total it up. Well, to do this, I'm going to drag that sales amount to our column section. And now, as you can see in the data preview, we have all of our sales amounts right here. Exactly what we want to sum up. So that's all we need to do, is just simply drag the sales amount to this column section. Click OK. And you'll now notice to the right of this number 1 field is the first value that's being returned. And down here, there's also a grand total. Not formatted, but it's the grand total of all the sales amounts. And even you can look up here, and now our sum function has data in it, where we're selecting the sales amount from our sales table. Exactly what we want to see. So I'm going to click OK. And here's our query that we built through the equation editor right here in our query tab. Click Save Tag. And last thing that we want to do, since the alt tag is going to print out a number or currency value, is that I want to format the data that's going to be displayed. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the sales and come up here and press the select button to make sure I've selected this full tag. And I'll come up here and click Format Data. So just like in Excel, we can click on currency. We can make this be 2 decimal places, negative numbers. Yep, this is the format that I'm looking for. So I can go ahead and apply this, close it. And now let's just go ahead and bold this as well. So I'm going to go up here to the home and click on bold. Just add a little formatting. Show you how easy it is to format. All right, now that I have my table set up the way I want, let's go ahead and generate the output to see the results of adding this sum function. So I'm going to go to Windward, tab, and click Output. All right, since we added so here's our table right here with that extra row down here. Since we added that N for each tag within the table, it's giving us this blank row, but we utilize that blank row by adding the grand total for our sales amount. Okay, so I think that was a great example for showing you how to conditionally format text for certain values. Here, red text for values under 8,000, and also adding a function, the sum function, one of the many functions within the equation editor that you can utilize. I just noticed the time. Sorry, I'm running a little late today. There's a couple more things that I'd like to show you. So I hope you stick with me, and we'll get through this next part fairly quick. All right, let's go back to our Windward Tools tab, and click the Samples button again. Now I want to show you conditionally formatting using if tags and switch case tags. So this time, let's open our if tag tutorial. And I think it's right here, okay? And so this sample gives you step-by-step instructions on how to utilize the if tag for what it's going to do. So let's look at the first example here, the if, out, and end if. Now the if tag is perfect when you want to show or hide specific elements within your template based on some condition within your data. So let's go ahead and select this if tag, and so this if tag is going to evaluate what's in it with a query that's set up within it, and if that query results in a true, then we're going to display everything between the beginning and ending if tags, which is just this out tag. And if this if condition evaluates to false, then it's going to skip over this out tag and carry on and display everything what comes after the end if tag. So let's take a look at this if tag and see what data we're actually evaluating here. So with it selected, go to Windward and click Preview. So here, in this if tag, we're evaluating if 1 is less than 2. This is just a simple evaluation. Your templates will probably contain more robust conditionals, but this is just an example for this sample. Since 1 is less than 2, this is going to return true. So this means that we're going to display this out tag right here. If it was false, if this condition came to be false, it would have skipped this out tag and gone on to the next thing. Let's now look at the out tag. What are we actually going to display? Since this if tag is evaluating the true, I'm going to go ahead and select it, come up here and click Preview. Okay, so this is just providing text that states 1 is less than 2, is what we think. So let's take a look at the output to see how this will look. There it is. We're now displaying in simple text, 1 is less than 2. Let's now look at the next example. The output right here indicates 3 is less than or equal to 4. So why is this showing? Let's go ahead and preview this if tag. If tag properties. Oh, just with it shrunk up like this, I was looking for the preview, and here it is. So let's preview this. And all we're doing here is evaluating if 3 is greater than 4. Of course, 3 is not greater than 4, so it evaluates the false. Since this if tag is evaluating to false, what Report Designer does is that it skips this first out tag and moves to the else tag. And it will display everything that's after the else tag all the way to the ending for if tag. Right now, this is just a simple out tag, but it could be used to show or hide information such as tables or text. Say, for example, you need to display different output based on a state. This would be one good way to do it. If the state is California, display some information. If not, display some other information. All right. So it doesn't matter what comes between the if and end if tags. We're going to show or hide certain elements of your template based on the conditional formatting. So since this if tag evaluates to false, if we were to preview the else tag right here after this else tag, and here we see 3 is less than or equal to 4, exactly what we see in our output. So if this if tag was to evaluate to true, this out tag would display instead. Let's go ahead and select it to see what it would display. And it would have simply displayed 3 is greater than 4. We don't see that because it was skipped, because this if tag evaluated to false. So that's the if tag. You'll want to use the if tag if you have 1 or 2 conditions or choices that you want to evaluate. But if you have 3 or more conditions that you want to evaluate to, you can use nested if tags like you see right here, where we have an if tag, an else, another if tag, an else tag, and then a couple end ifs. But we would actually suggest using the switch case tags. We've got 2 more examples. We'll show you the quick switch case tags, and then we'll do the import tag, and we'll be done. These are quick examples, just like this if tag. I'm going to close the output, go back to Windward Tools, click on the Samples button. So this time, we're going to discuss the switch tag, and we have a couple of different samples. Switch tags, so we have 2 different samples. We have switch tag and switch tag 2. I'll open up the second one. So here we have another table containing customer information. Let's preview this customer for each tag to see what data we're returning. Preview. And here we're returning customer ID, title, first name, middle name, whole bunch of information. Okay. And we're gonna just be displaying in this table the first name, last name, address, city, state, postal code. And then over here within our country code, this is where we added our switch tags. And all the switch tag does is it just tells Report Designer when to start evaluating case tags. So right here is our beginning switch tag, and here's our ending switch tag. And these, Canada, USA, Mexico, and Australia are a case tag. And now the switch tag link is just a little darker. You can maybe make that out than the case tag. Another way to tell the difference between the tags. All right, so next to our switch tag is our case tag. And these case tags are evaluating what looks to be countries. So if the country was Canada, display a Canadian flag. Then if the country's USA, an American flag, Mexico, a Mexican flag, Australia, an Australian flag. Well, let's take a look at the value we're evaluating right here in this Canada case tag. So I'm going to go ahead and double click it. And here's our tag editor. So we have our equal sign, var1, which just refers to our customer loop right here. And we want to look at the country region name from our customers loop and check if it's equal to Canada. If it is equal to Canada, then we want to display the Canadian flag. We'll do this for the rest of the country, and if the country region name equals one of the case tags condition, then show its flags. And then as soon as it meets one of these cases in the case tag, it's going to exit the switch. Move on to the next item in the list, which is this ending for each tag, and then loop through again, showing all these alt tags and then the specific flag for the next customer record. Let's go ahead and look at the output to see what it's going to show us. And you can see that the first record on the list, John Yang, has an Australian flag. Now, as I scroll down here, you can see Lauren Walker has an American flag that looks like Lauren's in Washington. Scroll down more, we got Luke Lal, and he's got the Canadian flag. So again, here, we're evaluating 4 case tags. So there's 4 questions or conditions that we're asking to show or hide certain values based on the customer's country. Right now, we're just showing or hiding a flag image for each record, but you could do anything else. All right, so that's the switch case tag. And like I said, there's just one more I want to go through. Also a quick discussion, and that is the input tag. So I'll go back to our Windward tools, click on our samples, and we have 3 different input samples. Here we got an input tag HTML, and an input tag image. So different examples that you can look through. We're going to go ahead and select this first one, as this just gives us a little something of all the examples. So this has a bunch of imports. Here we're importing an image right here. We're importing a PDF down here. Here's a DOCX that's being imported. We're importing a text file and a HTML page. So let's take a look at the output to see what these input tags are actually importing. So let's go to Windward and click Output. All right, split the screen. So first thing, In the output is our imported image. And what you see over here in the template is just an image preview. This is actually a tag. So if I was to double click on this image preview over here in the template, you'll see that it opens the tag editor. And here you can see the query and the actual path to the Windward to PNG file that's being returned. So here we're just showing you a preview in the template so you can see the image size and how it's going to lay out in the output. And one last thing I want to point out is you may have noticed that there's no additional content right here for the PDF import. So the only way that you could import PDF is by outputting to PDF. So if we were to output to PDF instead of Word, this would display the PDF input right here. Okay. But we're not displaying it just because we're outputting to DOCX. Well, let me just show you quickly. So if I do now output the PDF, and expand this, here's our image file, and now here is our PDF being imported. And then we go down here to our template, and here is our image, our template, and this time, no PDF as its DOCX output. All right, let's go back to the slides just to make sure we didn't miss anything. I showed you the if tag and how it evaluates when it's true. It shows everything between the beginning and ending if tags. If you have multiple evaluations or conditions that you're trying to check against, for instance, 3 or more, you'll want to use the switch case tags. And you may want to take a screenshot of this slide if you can while we're on it. Here are some resources that you can utilize. Our Windward User Center is a central page for everything Windward support, and that's at windwardstudios.com/user-support-center. So here, there are, within this user center, you'll find links to our knowledge resources, our training videos, template libraries, and more. If you want to look up anything from our knowledge base, you can do this at our new Ohana knowledge base at ohana.windwardstudios.com. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can reach out to our amazing support team at support.windwardstudios.com, or you can also email them at support@windwardstudios.com. So if you have a question that you can't find the answer to, go ahead and contact our support team. If you want to retrieve your license keys, you can do this at store.windward.net. And if you want any changes or have any feature requests that you want added to the engine or report designer, you can do this at ideas.windward.net. All right. Well, there's going to be a short survey at the end of this webinar. Please feel free to fill it out truthfully. Any feedback that you can provide will help me and the attendees of the next webinar. Well, I want to thank you all for joining today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and goodbye now.